Barry.
Morning.
Morning.
The early risers. Actually, no, the East Coast risers.
Yeah, 11 a.m. How you doing?
8 o'clock now over here.
Yep. So you have underscores in your name. So what's that case called when you have underscores?
Is it snake?
Because I recently learned about kebab case. If you use hyphens, it's like you're putting the letters on a shish kebab.
That has been like a 50-year-old convention ever since Lisp, way back
That's
in, yeah, actually probably 60. 6 decades.
wow.
First one I learned was camel case.
Camel
Camel is
case is
fun.
stupid. In my opinion, camel case is stupid.
It's the only one that I actually recall it had a name.
Yeah.
And when I first saw it, I didn't know what it meant. I think I eventually figured it out, but
Okay, and welcome, Stacy.
Hi, Stacy.
Good morning.
Well, it was interesting yesterday. I thought I had things to talk about, but people sort of meandered onto some, what I thought some good topics. I can't actually remember the specific focus. There were probably several of them. But what's happened to you guys in the intervening 22 hours? Or for you, Eric, intervening 170 hours plus?
Wow. A lot of hours. Hmm.
Well, if nobody has anything to say, I'll start.
Go for it.
Um, I want to follow up on the last part of our call yesterday.
That was a good one. I recall that.
Now I'm wondering if it's the same one.
Would you like to recap for Eric and possibly Barry and possibly myself?
I think I
Yeah,
slept through parts
yeah,
of
and possibly myself too. But
Well, then it'll be fun. Okay.
okay, so here's the thing. I know when I got off what I said to myself I want to bring with me when I come here today. There was one part of the call. I'm trying to think how it came up. Oh, so Sam and I were basically relating on the fact that different audiences should be in different rooms for different topics. And in this case, it had to do with like astrology and tarot readings and things like that. And I was saying that people that already believe in that stuff have a different conversation than people who need to have it proven to them. And so, therefore, they shouldn't be in the same room because it creates like blockages. So, I wanted to follow up with that and just clarify a little bit. What I really want to be able to say is that it points towards different questions. So, it's not that it's a blockage as much as it's a diversion and it makes it take longer for all of us. Whereas if we're divided, I would rather organize people along the lines of the questions they want to ask. So the last thing I'm going to say is, as I had shared with Barry the other day, I work and I learn in a spiral, and that spirals up and it spirals down. And that's the way I want to continue to go. And I'll stop there.
Actually, that's one of the features of my model of emotions learning is the helix, the ascending and the descending helix, which is a phase space model of emotions and learning. It's
Which
kind of
part
our
is helix? I don't know what a helix is. Which part?
spiral. Helix is a spiral.
Okay, thank you.
But
It's a
it's
whole
kind of like a
section.
never-ending one, where sometimes spiral assumes that there's a compression at the top or something like that.
Well, in my
Or
case,
bottom.
it narrows down and eventually, well, ideally, it narrows down and converges. As the
So,
screen gets smaller and smaller until it converges.
It converges at
okay,
death.
Yeah.
uh,
The
I'm
ideal
glad
case.
you I'm glad you said that because I was going to say in my model, it does converge in death, but death of a cycle. And life is just one cycle. Like I'm coming from a place of believing in like past lives or or alternate realities. So those spirals would converge and then it would go on to the next one and then the next one. So it is infinite in my model.
It's actually quite mathematical. It's a very powerful mathematical model that most
So what
people,
I want to ask is each turn around the cycle, it's a journey from not understanding something to feeling the emotions and struggling through them and then making a breakthrough and then going up a level or
right?
around the next time, right?
Yeah, it's a cycle of learning and unlearning, and
Right.
emotions, positive and negative valence emotions, and little by little you weed out the misconceptions and add um, sustainable improvements until basically the process converges to a stable um, mental model.
So in human development, those little improvements would be a person's inner growth and evolution so that they can achieve their highest potential.
Yeah,
That's the piece I'm trying to bring.
yeah. It's true for any learning system, whether it's a human or a non-living human, non-living learning system. It doesn't matter. Alien life. It's just a model of the ups, the hills and valleys of the learning curve, Sam.
So I don't fundamentally have any problem with that model, so long as I add the following comment. It must be done well, because if done unwell, it could be censorship. That's all I'll say.
Well, that's the power of a positive or negative coach or a critic. Positive coaches and negative critics are sort of the the boon
So,
and the bane of a learner.
so I want to understand when you say censorship, is it you're not able to access information that you could have found yourself if it was available? Like you're
Within that
being,
community, yes. So in other
mhm.
words, let's say, and I like the martial arts model, and Stacy, correct me if this doesn't apply, okay? So if I'm a white belt, I want to go to all the black belt practices, okay? I'm not going to be able to stand, half a second with any of them, okay? Especially if we're sparring, okay? So this makes sense for me to spar with other white belts and then learn some skills and learn some defenses and move up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And at some point, the black belts might welcome me, okay? Now, that's one model. There's another model, okay, and this is a very specific case where when Nicholas was 10 years old, this is going to be 2002, in San Diego, there was an event called the Desktop Linux Summit. I think it's the only one that's ever been held, okay? And there were a bunch of guys there, basically talking about this version of Linux, that distro of Linux, it's all very techie geeky because at that time Linux was not very usable. But I took my son Nick. He was 10 years old. So they could have looked at him and said, "No, you're not welcome here." Or they actually looked at him and said, "Hey, check out this game, or check out what this can do, and come join us." Okay. Now it did detract from other conversations they could have had with their techie geeky, peers. But it's an interesting choice that, they didn't complain about Nick being there, and there were games that he could actually get himself occupied with. And now he works on Linux software. By the way, I have a picture of him and about a dozen other adults at this thing. He's a 10-year-old, and then there's all these adults. I gotta find that picture. It's so lost, but that would be an awesome picture because very few children understand, Linux history that way. Anyway, so what
So
I'm saying is, if people are interested in conversation efficiency, then yes, it's a detraction for me as a beginner to come and say, these beginner questions bother me, so please explain to me, okay? Now, if I was respectful, I would myself be aware of that, and I wouldn't interject and make them deal with my misunderstandings, okay? But there are contexts in which it's more inclusive and less exclusive and less efficiency oriented and more education or, spreading the meme or, accommodating. So that was the point I wanted to make. Over. I don't disagree about the efficiency point. Over.
When I write about that phenomenon, the title of the section that I like to use is taboo or not taboo. That's the question.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so, Sam, for educational purposes only, let me just say that I could have answered your question exactly the same way after your first example with the white belt and the black belt.
Mhm.
And that would have been preferable to me because the stuff that you added after, I'd love to hear it at a different time and place because that was kind of hard for me to hold myself in and focus. And it was just a lot of words, which
I have an example that you might relate to
Wait,
better.
wait, wait. What was a lot
can
of
I
words? The story
wait,
about the Linux Summit was a lot of words?
whoa, whoa, whoa. Let me just answer the question based on the first part of what you said, which was the white belt, the black belt. My answer would have been that yes, the white belt should be in the room watching, but nobody's going to ask to spar with them. So my answer is it should be a fishbowl kind of thing. Like everybody is welcome to be there, but if they haven't reached if they're not at a certain place, they don't go past that membrane. They observe. Over.
Can I add to that?
It's up to Eric. Hi, Kayla.
Hey, Kayla.
Go ahead, Sam.
Yay. Hi, Stacy and
Hi,
Sam
hi, Kayla.
Hey. So let me answer the
and
question.
Eric.
And Eric, sorry to interrupt. Okay. So
Barry.
so Stacy, in
Yeah.
response, in
Yes.
a martial arts dojo, it is very clear that certain people have certain stripes or belts or colors, that indicate that they have certain skills. Now, in conversation or in discussion about certain, parts of knowledge which don't have that similar certification, people self-certify. Like everybody in the world thinks they're the best at communicating, okay? And everybody else is inferior, okay? Okay, 99%, Barry. But so there isn't that similar certification. There isn't a thing that says, yes, I've learned NVC, or yes, I've learned not to interrupt people, or yes, I do interrupt people on certain occasions, or yes, I know when to tell a joke, or yes, I know when to get angry and when not to get. We don't go through certifications like that. Okay. So we all self-certify because we're all doing the best we can. So we think the behavior that we each exhibit is the optimum. Okay. And we all do that here. Okay. So it's clear in a martial arts dojo who's got what skills and who doesn't, so who belongs in what class and what doesn't. It's less clear when such certification and leveling up and badging and striping and insignia are not quite so clear. Over.
I'll let Eric go first and then I'll answer that.
Okay.
So I'd like to relate that to another example. So I used to go to user group meetings after work, and this is people who are trying to learn new skills, new technologies. So there's usually a presenter and maybe 100 people in the audience trying to follow it and ask questions, and mostly men. Now, that's a good question. Why mostly men? There's been research on that. And now um, I've heard like comments about the meetings like that where women say they have to put on their armor in order to go into that kind of meeting. And that was hard for me to understand why they would feel that way. But there apparently is certain male energy coming through in these technical discussions where everybody's just trying to learn the latest skills they need for work. So if you want to talk about that, that might be interesting.
Yeah, that ties in to my answer. So Sam, Can you imagine a scenario where the master comes over and tells somebody that their stance is wrong, and the person says, "Oh no, this is the way you do it"? Probably not. As a woman, I am tired of having to explain why I know what I do know before I can get somebody to try something my way. So, in terms of the conversations where the readers are doing their thing, and I wanted to question them about how they're doing it, somebody that doesn't even believe they're doing anything at all is not who I want to get input from in that situation. They can watch, they can listen, they could even write down questions to be followed up with later in a different group. But the whole energy, or actually, I want to start using the word flavor, the whole flavor of that group changes. And we want to be respectful of the flavor of any group because every single, like each one of us is a compound. And we want to be respectful of every single compound that enters into the petri dish. And feel free to correct me if I ever slightly use a scientific word the wrong way. I trust that you'll know my meaning and you'll correct it for me. Did that answer everybody's questions?
Yeah, like I said, I don't have any disagreement with that. I just go back to my one comment, which I added. This will be the second time I say it, and that is so long as that's not akin to censorship.
I'm glad you brought that up. So, with the work I do, I'm only focused on the individual. So, it's up to the individual whether or not they censor themselves. In my particular little, the bite that I'm taking of this apple that I want to do my way, it's only about individual growth. And so, it's up to the individual if they're going to censor themselves or not. So, it's not an issue.
Okay. Anybody else with opening statements or opening topics?
I'm wondering if we could ask AI to summarize so that Kayla could at least catch up, see what went on. And for us, I'm interested in seeing what it would say as well.
Let's see, AI companion. See, we each have an interaction with AI companion, right? But it doesn't seem to be shared for all of us, does it?
No.
We have to cut copy paste, right?
Yeah.
All right. Stacy, would you like to do that? Or Barry, would you like to do that?
Not me. That doesn't go with my feminine nature whatsoever. I am putting my boundary up. I am human. I don't use AI.
If you click catch me up, you'll get your own private summary of what you missed.
I could paste in what I just got if anyone wants that.
Go ahead,
There's a
Eric.
limit to how much you can paste, though. That's the problem.
All right, I'll
1,000 characters.
Yeah, I'm over by 100 characters.
That's the
Let's see.
problem.
I could
it keeps
copy half of it.
analyzing. It's
Yeah, if I
taking me a
copy
while.
half of it,
Oh, I got it. You want me
you
to read
got it.
mine? Yeah. Here is a
Yeah.
summary of the meeting so far. The meeting began with a discussion about different naming conventions in programming. Oh, this is not what we talked. Oh, I
That's what
wasn't on for this. Okay.
Yeah, Eric and I were doing that. Yeah.
Okay. Such as snake case, kebab case, and camel case. We'll have to go back. I have no idea what that. I'll watch it.
Okay.
Stacy then brought up a topic from a previous meeting about separating audiences for different topics, specifically mentioning astrology and tarot readings. She emphasized the importance of organizing people based on the questions they want to ask to avoid diversions. Barry Court introduced his model of learning, which involves a helix or spiral pattern. I got to stop right here. Does anybody notice anything?
I noticed you stopped.
Kayla, did you notice anything? I find it interesting. I'm referred to as Stacy and Barry's referred to as Barry Court. But anyway, just wanted to point that out. Introduced his model of learning, which involves a helix or spiral pattern. This led to a discussion about cycles of learning, emotions, and personal growth. Sam, only first name too, raised concerns about the potential for censorship when separating audiences, using examples from martial arts and a Linux summit to illustrate his point about inclusivity versus efficiency in learning environments. Okay, hold on. I'm scrolling. Sorry. I can't get it to.
Can I add a point for the record?
Yes, because I'm still trying to scroll anyway.
When I asked AI to summarize, it used only first names for everyone. So no one was identified with first and last in my interaction with AI.
I would expect it would only use the first name of the person inquiring and might use the full name. Now, Sam's full name is underscore S underscore A underscore am, no last name. It couldn't give Sam's last name. It's not there.
But mine's there.
Yeah, but you were the inquirer. So when it's talking back to you, you don't say, Stacy Druss. No, I would say, Stacy,
Right.
so you only use the name of the person who's asking the question because they know who they are.
Right.
If you're
Okay.
referring to a third party, you might need to identify the third party more clearly because they've hardly participated.
Okay,
Right.
so let's all just pay attention to that going forward and see if Barry's answer is correct. Okay. Yes. I got there's more here though.
Okay, please go because I have a second very different topic that you just triggered me on. Okay.
Okay. The group then discussed the challenges of self-certification in conversation skills compared to more structured systems like martial art ranking. Eric brought up an example of tech user group meetings and the challenges women face. This is really terrible that I can't, maybe if I pop it up, because okay. Barry,
Mhm.
it just like took my whole thing away. Hold on a minute. Okay, I got it. Potential and learning environment. Eric brought up an example. Okay. Eric brought up an example of tech user group meetings and the challenges women face in male-dominated environments. Stacy responded by emphasizing the importance of respecting different group dynamics and allowing individuals to choose whether to censor themselves or not. Here I was responding and just used my first name. The conversation concluded with a request to summarize the meeting for Kayla, who had just joined.
This is juicy.
Juicy is good. Juicy is good.
Stacy, could I ask you for a anecdote?
To give or to get one?
Give one. To give one. To give one.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So when was the last time that you entered a meetup like that and felt excluded?
I, Stacy, my being will not allow that to happen. So I puff up and I put on my armor and I charge into the space. You've seen me for 8 years. Do you not know that about me?
No, I'm specifically asking for a reason.
What do you mean? A
In other
reason
words,
why I do it?
let's see if that is juxtaposed with the point about having certain communities and forums for certain groups of people,
Okay, I can do that for you right now.
right?
Now remember, I'm always coming from the emotional part of it, from the feminine part of it, from the spiritual part of it, as I've explained many times. So, as an example, I will bring up certain topics on my Friday call that I'm with Doug Breitbart in and maybe two or three other people. That's where I'm at my softest That's where I wear no armor whatsoever. I am as honest and as vulnerable as it gets. That is my safety place. That's where I'm the most safe. Here, I'm 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 safe in the sense that I can hold my own. But I have to, have my muscles built up. On OGM, it's more of a professional setting. So I'm still myself, but I'm more staid, STAID. I don't like that's constricting to me. So I don't know. I said so. I'm doing this workshop thing that I'm planning, and the idea is that each call will be tailored to whoever shows up for that call. Because I am more of an improvisational person, I want to feel into and sense into who's in the room to know how I'm going to present or what material I'm going to present.
Okay. So Barry, Kayla, Eric, do you guys mind if I do a little bit of one-on-one with Stacy here?
Go ahead.
My guest.
Is it when you sense what is going to be acceptable or not, do you feel, because you said you use the word restricted, do you feel that certain questions are inappropriate simply because of the people who are already in the room?
So let me refine the word acceptable. It's not, it's a choice I make because in every situation, I want to present myself in in the best way for everybody involved. So if I'm out at night and I'm sitting with some friends, let's say, and we're drinking, and I'm like, well, I don't even need the drinking part, but if it's a very social environment, my comedy or my jokes is going to be way spicier than I would bring into an OGM call.
Go get a drink, Stacy.
Oh, listen, trust me, I'm in that spiral we talk about. The way that I do my workshops is on a spiral. And at certain places along that spiral, it's a lot spicier because it's it's like cooking. I will tailor whatever dish I'm cooking to the people that are showing up. If I know I have guests who are vegan, I might make something different than if, we're just having tapas and I know that the people there love chili peppers. But that's something that's fun for me. That's the way I express my creativity. And I think that that's at the heart of what this acceptable male female thing does for me. It makes me suppress my own creative nature, spirit, heart, purpose, all of those things. And I've been looking to solve for that. And so the exercises that I've come up with and the way I will pair them together are designed to meet not only my needs, but the people there as well. So it's a win-win workshop. Barry, that would be WWW.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. So,
Win-win workshop.
do you guys see the point I'm trying to make here? Is that when I responded to your spiral comment initially, I said, so long as it's done well, right? If it's done unwell, then you could definitely feel, or I could definitely feel in that situation, that I'm restricted from asking certain questions. To me, that would feel like censorship.
Right. I would never make you feel like you were any workshop I would ever lead, I promise you, you would never feel censored.
Oh, that sounds like a challenge.
Well, here's the beauty of it. If it came a point that you did and a conflict arose, that's a learning opportunity. And that's what I look forward to. So
Right.
that
I agree. I agree. In fact, I think this is a learning opportunity as well.
every minute is a learning opportunity.
But specifically vis-a-vis the appropriate conversation and the self-suppression of questions and whether or not there's a censorship line somewhere in there that we have to be sensitive to. So that was the picture in my mind that I wanted to express. And at that point, I'll just let it go because I think it's already been made unless people want me to go on with it.
I think it's clear.
All right. Eric, Stacy, Kayla, anybody?
I know I've been really quiet, but I'm just listening for now. Um, just doing a little bit of gardening.
So just since you were listening, did that make sense or did that kind of just not make sense?
No, it made sense. Both of you, I understood you guys, I think. I was trying to make a connection and looking for relatability so that I could better understand it. Make sense?
So what are you growing?
I right now am pushing rocks.
But what do you want to grow in that
That's
space?
Kayla,
Oh,
parenthesis, Sisyphus.
what?
It's a Greek mythology, Sisyphus pushing the stone up a hill. The stone is,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, no, I have DG, decomposed gravel or granite, and the dogs often dig. So I'm just trying to clean it up a little bit.
Good.
Your
And
dogs
then I'm
eat
gonna
that
water.
stuff?
No, I mean, I've caught them chewing on it, but they
Yeah.
never digest it.
I've got one dog, Hera, who will eat rocks, literally just carry them around, eat rocks, and then occasionally, poop them out. It's really gross.
Ew. Yeah. No, but it's been really nice doing simple things like cooking for myself and my kid, of course, getting groceries, watering the plants. I mean, I didn't get to do this for like a year and a half. So I'm surprised that no, I'm not surprised. They're drought tolerant, but um, I intend on keeping my plants alive. And I'm really grateful for days like this. So, anyways, I was just listening in. If I have a thought or want to contribute, then I'll definitely um, do so.
Yeah, enjoy the weather, whatever you can get. Yeah, 'cause when you're outside and in nature, it means everything. Yeah, I hear you
Yeah.
about yeah, doing simple things. Like for me, doing the laundry today, it was just yeah, distraction from everything else on my mind. Listening to a podcast while I'm doing it, but still, it's something. Yeah, yeah, we need to be nice to our minds.
Hmm. I agree.
Mhm.
So I'd like to follow up with something
Go ahead.
if I could. And again, I'm going to keep pulling us back to, you know, bullying and stuff like that. I mentioned yesterday that I had put a story in that group that I call the cesspool. I call them the cesspool because they're like the worst of the worst far right people. And what I want to share is on that post, 91 people reacted in a loving, caring way. The comments were thanking me, how beautiful it was, except for two separate men who just said something stupid like, one said something, you know, again, they just had to say something for the point of saying it, at which point I thanked them for showing us who they were. Um, do you want to hear? Well, actually, would you like to hear the story of the post? It's the bullying post. Because I think what it did for me is it helped open up a little bit of a conversation in a really positive way. Okay, so I wrote, I wish I could credit this story to someone. I can't, but I sense they'd be happy just to know it's been read. Please do read it. And I put a heart and prayer emoji. Those were my words because I don't know who wrote this story. Every morning, Calvin would shoot out the front door like a firecracker, yelling goodbye to the dog, waving his toy dinosaur, and racing towards the bus like it was the best part of his day. He was 6, full of life and grinning like he had a secret to share with the world. But then things began to dim. At first, it was subtle, a missing smile, a quiet good morning barely whispered. Then came the stomach aches with no cause, sleepless nights, the hallway light left on, and eventually the drawing stopped. Calvin, who once filled entire walls with dinosaurs and dragons, now handed me blank pages, or worse, angry black scribbles crumpled into balls. I tried to tell myself it was just a phase, but deep down I knew better. So one morning I didn't just watch from the porch. I walked him all the way to the bus. He clung to his backpack straps like they were the only solid thing he had. No smile, no wave. When the bus doors hissed opened, he hesitated like he was stepping into something dangerous. Go ahead, sweetheart, I said softly. You've got this. He nodded, eyes full of storm clouds, and stepped aboard. That's when I saw it. He headed toward the front, but a kid in the back made a comment, something I couldn't hear, but didn't need to. There was a smirk, a nudge, a finger pointing. Calvin pulled his hat low, turned to the window, and wiped his cheek with his sleeve. He was crying. And then something unexpected. The bus didn't move. Miss Carmen, our longtime driver, still holding the wheel with one hand, reached back with the other. She didn't say a word. She just offered her hand. And Calvin took it like it was a lifeline. They stayed like that, silent, still, for a moment. Just her hand wrapped around his, holding him steady. Later that day, the bus pulled up and parked, but Miss Carmen didn't just wave goodbye. She climbed out, walked straight over to the waiting parents, and said what no one else would. Some of your kids are hurting other kids, she said. Calm, clear, unapologetic. Some parents looked confused, others offended. She continued, this isn't harmless teasing. It's bullying, targeting, scarring a child so badly he cries every single morning. That's not just kids being kids. That's something we fix. Then she looked at me. I've seen your son shrink into his seat for 3 weeks. I saw him tripped in the aisle. I heard him called a freak, and nobody said a word. I felt the guilt hit like a wave. I hadn't seen it, not fully. And then Miss Carmen delivered the line I'll never forget. We fix it now, not next week, not when it's easier, today. Or I start naming names, and trust me, I know every one of them. She climbed back onto her bus and drove away like it was just another day. But for us, it wasn't. That night, I finally asked Calvin what was going on, and this time I really listened. He told me everything. About the boy who shoved his lunch off the table, the group that mocked his dinosaur hoodie, the time someone tore his drawing and laughed, and how each day he felt smaller, more invisible. I held him that night as he cried, not just because of what happened, but because he finally could. The next morning, we walked into school together. This time, we didn't just drop him off. We asked to speak with the principal, the counselor, and yes, Miss Carmen came too. She stood by us like a quiet warrior, nodding as Calvin told his story. The school took action, not the polite kind, the real kind. Meetings were called, parents were informed, policies were enforced, teachers kept sharper eyes, and most importantly, the kids who had hurt Calvin were held accountable. But change didn't just happen in the office. It started showing up in the hallways. A classmate left Calvin a kind note. A teacher asked him to lead story time. Someone invited him to sit at lunch. It wasn't perfect, not all at once, but Calvin started drawing again. First, a tiny T-Rex in the corner of a page. Then a whole herd of brontosauruses charging across the fridge. One morning, a few weeks later, Calvin bolted out the door, waving his toy dinosaur like a flag again. He yelled goodbye to the dog, spun in a circle, and ran to the bus. At the top of the steps, he paused and turned back. "I'm okay, Mama," he said. "You fixed it." But the truth is, he fixed it with his courage, his honesty, and the quiet strength to keep going. And Miss Carmen, she still drives the same route, still keeps one hand on the wheel, and the other always ready to reach back. The end.
Wow. It's beautiful. I mean, I could see why that would touch people. No matter what, it's a universal message.
Now, here's where the dividing people into groups comes in. I think everybody in this room can relate to that story, probably on many levels, as a parent, as a child, as a teacher. Let's go back to my Facebook group, though. There was somebody, I was able to introduce, we also need to help the bully. Other parents mentioned how some of it comes from the home. I would not put the guy that said, "Nobody's reading this crap," into the group with the people like us. He would not be helpful. Not only that, I can't wait to get people like him into a group where where I could give my brand of payback. And that wouldn't be with people like you, because you don't deserve that kind of treatment. And I believe that people should get what they deserve. Over.
Now, looking at that story, it spread the responsibility for the issue across all the people. The parents, teachers, and everybody got involved because the bus driver stood up and said, "We're fixing this. Not going to let it slide." Um, Most of the time, I don't think that happens. I think it just festers and gets worse. And so, yeah, there's a positive outcome in this story. Um, but yeah, it gets people thinking that, yeah, it does take a village to raise a kid and deal with anything that can happen. And it is a cruel world for kids, I think, dealing with what they're going through these days, especially with the social media amplification. I wouldn't want to be a kid these days.
Well, for grown-ups too, it's pretty hard.
Yeah, oh yeah, I know.
Sam?
So the fact that it was happening on the bus, I think it's highly improbable that that was the only place it was happening. It's probably happening, in the locker room. It's probably happening at lunch, probably happening in the hallways, probably happening in the back of the room, probably happening at school dances. So it's curious to me that there are plenty, I would suppose, I can't prove this obviously, plenty of opportunities to observe such behavior at other times, and people just let it go. So I commend the driver for stepping forward and doing something. But I'm also questioning the community that would let it go for 3 weeks and probably much, much, much longer before someone actually stepped up and said something and did something. I'm not trying to castigate anyone. I'm talking about this is a society we live in where such behavior is the norm. And I find that sad. Over.
So this is a perfect example of why I have different conversations for different people. Because the conversations that I want to have would now focus on people's personal stories, where they can relate to it in their own lives. Because for me, in this space, being what I said before, that everyone in this space is pretty sensitive, regardless of how we present ourselves. So in this space, I would not want to lose a valuable opportunity by looking for what else is wrong in the world. That does not help me to get to fixing the system and what's right with the world. And that's what I want to be a part of. So I don't want to censor anybody. I don't want to take away their ability to go down that road and place blame in all these other places. But I also don't want to be a part of it. So that's where I would probably step out, let that conversation be led by somebody else, and move along the spiral to the conversation that I want to bring people along on. Over. Does that make sense, Sam? I see you nodding.
No, no, it makes perfect sense, which is
Good.
why these conversations are a place for us to exchange these ideas and stories. But then as we move out into the world for the other 166 hours of the week, we take action as we feel appropriate for our context and circumstance and environment. So I think this is at least an implied understanding of some of the exchanges that happen here. And it's in a sense a response to you're not doing anything kind of a comment or criticism.
So I could share that when I was in school, um, I enjoyed learning and I was doing well in school, and that made me a social outcast among most of the people who, I don't know why, they didn't even, I don't know if there were signals that I was doing better than others and that got them upset. I can't really figure it out, but and I wasn't really into sports, so um, but it was a stigma that lasted most of my academic career until probably college. um, and I know I just focused on learning, immersed myself in it, and then when computers came around, I immersed myself in that. And so I've always had social issues, confusion about social situations, and parents tried, but I only had a few friends growing up. So, and these are very different times. We're talking the late 70s, early 80s. It's very different now. But yeah, just throwing that out. I'm sure others can relate to similar experiences.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up because I really, and this is what I thought, Sam, that you agreed would be a good thing to do, to focus on the bully. And, so, since nobody in this room is a bully, I can't ask them. Although I do know people who used to be bullies, and trust me, I will be asking them. But my guess is that there's some jealousy that they feel inferior. And you doing that well in school,
Mhm.
they want to knock it down.
yeah, it was their uncertainty.
Sam?
Yeah, Eric, I don't know how similar your experience is with mine. I'm probably much older than you are, but there was certainly an implication that, hey, if I got good grades, I was pushing the grades of other people down if the teacher graded on a curve. Okay. And that was kind of a um, a stigmatizing social phenomenon. Then there's the other aspect, which is those people who didn't value academics so much, but were popular or good in sports or, captain of the football team kind of thing. They got the accolades. But people like you who got A's in math didn't get accolades from the rest of the school, I suspect, if your experience is anything like mine, right? So I
I
think
just got
there
a
is,
bunch of certificates for, but that,
right.
yeah, but
So
the
what I
other
mean is
kids
by your
didn't get it.
peers,
Yeah.
the other
Yeah,
students.
the other peers didn't care that I
Right.
was excelling.
And I'm going to ask a question because it's meaningful to me. I'm going to ask it of you, but I would also ask you not to answer that question, okay? And that is, like, how many of the kids asked you to eat lunch with them? How many of the girls asked you to eat lunch with them? Right? And I know the answer for myself. So it's, I think when Stacy, when you were reading that story, I could imagine most people have similar stories, but this, you're right, doesn't get talked about enough. So one of the good aspects of what's happening today is we're all realizing how rampant these bullying situations are in today's US society. It's really, really sad, which is why I want to make reference again to something I said yesterday about Japan and the way schools work there. The first 8 years, 9 years, whatever, 10 years, the Japanese kids are taught to be good people first. And they're not even tested for academic topics until, much, much later. Because it's that important to that society that you can walk down the streets of Japan and not see trash everywhere. You're not going to see people leave bubblegum wrappers on the sidewalk. It's almost true that you could go into a Japanese subway station and almost eat off the floor. It's that clean. But that's because as a society, they've made it a priority and they've started with the kids. One of your favorite, suggestions, Stacy, which I strongly support, which is teach the kids. You said teach the boys. I say teach the boys, yes. Not to do certain things, that here in the US is commonplace. Over.
Yeah, two quick things. Well, three things. Yes, teach the children. I'm going to move on from there. Teach the children. Two quick things. One is, wouldn't it be great if teachers based a student's progress on their individual curve, like if instead of with other people? So that would be my first thing, measuring the individual's progress. The other
Can't
thing,
nod my head strongly enough. Sorry, Kate.
you have emojis for that. Press the heart.
This is my emoji.
Press the heart. You want all this technology? Use it. Use it when it's useful.
Hey, Stacy, careful what you say.
Okay, before I forget, the other thing is on the post where I said the 91 people reacted and there were numerous comments. The other male, his comment was, I just teach my kids to beat the bullies up. End of story. So again, I quipped back. Thank you for identifying yourself. So yeah, I do. So in order to teach the children, I would like to start diagnosing the bully so that we can reframe the way we speak about it so that grown men feel shamed. The men we're talking about have no shame. We need to give people what they lack. They lack shame. We need to shame them. Well, we don't have to. I'm happy to do it. Go ahead.
I see the sense in what you're saying, but they're so shameless that they don't even care they have no shame. Shame doesn't matter to them. What matters to them is power, assets, influence, and stature. And I think we have to go beyond shaming them to actually, addressing their power, addressing their stature. Because I think shame means nothing to people who have already reached 40, 50, 60, 70s, and shame has not bothered to make an influence on them.
So if I could just say quickly, my method addresses that and uses that knowledge that you just shared. And it's not for everybody. I have a particular flavor about myself.
So, yeah, you and I could get into some very juicy workshops here because, like I say, I don't try to speak French to pigs. Nothing about pigs. They just don't understand French.
And so to go back to the male-female dynamics, how it affects me here. For many years, I felt like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill because I was trying to explain myself and to be understood in order to feel like I have permission to go ahead with what I know I need to be doing. As time went on, I took more of a Goldilocks approach and traveled to different houses to find one that was just right. I'll stop. Over.
Are you in bed?
Am I in bed? I actually am. I do my best work. Well, see what I mean about being spicy?
Yep. I'd like to bring up an example in the movie The Back to the Future. So um, it's a bullying situation when
Not
the
Biff.
guy. Yeah, well, definitely. I want to look at this, see if
Yeah.
it relates to what Stacy's trying to do, if this is how this fits in.
Oh,
So,
Scott, Eric, just the fact that you're using a movie reference already relates to what Stacy's trying to do. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want to be able to do. Go ahead.
right. But in that movie, Biff kept bullying Marty's father until Marty punched him. So it would have continued if he had just stepped away from the car. So that took violence, and that's because like it was years and years of bullying. And you saw like the parallels when they grew up and they were in business, how Biff just kept on the bullying because of that relationship that was established. So yeah, like could it have been stopped any other way? That's my question.
So my answer is not under the patriarchy, which is why I'm on a mission to shift the patriarchy so that it doesn't totally collapse, but it recenters itself.
So you're trying to squeeze the patriarchy into a small state, maybe? Like, I don't
Well,
know.
put it, I think I'm trying to just kick it aside, leave it there for anybody who wants to stay there, and do the Bucky Fuller approach and just build something better. Build back better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I was
mean, you
trying
got
to
to be
buy,
realistic. Yep.
I was trying to buy bus tickets for MAGAs to Florida.
Though, I feel like the patriarchy does need to collapse, though. I do feel like it needs to blow up.
Yeah, I
That's how I feel. Um, I just feel like it needs to fail so people can understand that it isn't working.
but I want to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
May I respond to both those comments?
Yes, you may.
Kayla, I think it will fail. And the problem is, as Stacy says, all the babies will be thrown out with the bathwater because this country is going down. That's how it will fail. It's going to take this country down. You're seeing it already.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, right? To think that. I find myself wondering why I think that because, nothing ever, nothing good ever came out of war. There's just way too much sacrifice in war. But I don't know. It just like freaks me out to think that I believe that, to be very honest. And I'll just leave you guys with that.
No, but you're right. And yet they keep doing it. And when I say they, I mean, come on. Who's the majority of the they that's making those decisions? Our
Bankers,
administration
weapons
right now is,
manufacturers, and corrupt politicians.
but beyond that, going back to the male-female dynamics, we have a bunch of bullies in the administration. And I really want to stick with the bully thing because that cuts across everything.
Yeah.
Okay,
One
so
thing, go ahead. I'm sorry.
look to the next generation that can take power. Now, who are they? Is it Generation X or I'm not sure. Like
Oh no,
who?
I'm Gen X.
Yeah, I'm Gen X. So what is it? Gen Y? That would be the
Oh
next one to take
yeah.
power.
Yeah, it's millennials, then Gen Z, and then now Gen Alpha.
Okay. So how are they being brought up? How would they be able to deal? Like they work very differently.
Hmm.
A lot of teamwork and uh, now to counteract the forces. So right now the whole country's being squeezed like a lemon, right? Like how much can we cut? How would the counteracting forces of reason be put in by the next generation?
I'll be in the kitchen making lemonade, and you guys continue to talk about
Yeah,
that.
keep squeezing us, right? Hmm.
You put sugar in your
Yeah.
lemonade? Sorry. Sorry.
I'll
I was gonna
probably,
say, oh, go
sorry,
for
I
it.
was just going to say, I'll leave out the sugar. People could add their own sugar. Go ahead, Kayla.
Homemade lemonade does sound really good right now, actually.
Right?
Something refreshing and homegrown. But I was gonna say back to the bullying thing. I have to agree with you right there. There's a lot of bullies in the administration, and there's a lot of bimbos too. I mean, it's disappointing as a female to see bimbos in the lead. Um, but what do you do, right? So anyhow, I just was thinking about like how I was bullied too as a kid, and it did come from a place of jealousy. And if I did any type of bullying, you know, as a kid, as an adult, it comes from a type of jealousy. Like you have something that I don't have, or you're getting attention, or something, really ridiculous. Um, I just feel like that's kind of what's happening right now. There's this fear, there's this, like who are the haves and the have nots, and it's just one huge divide. But yeah, it kind of comes from that place of bullying. That's the connection. Anyways, over. Go ahead, Stacy.
Yeah, so I just want to reframe something when it comes to bimbos in the administration because while I do think they're bullies as well, I don't think they're bimbos. They're acting like the other bullies. They are adjusting to that system to get ahead. They're selling out, doing what they need to do, just like every other kiss ass in that administration. So I wouldn't necessarily call them bimbos. They may not be as smart, but none of those people in the administration are that smart. So I just want to be really careful to not judge the same characters differently
I
because
see.
of their
So,
sex.
what's your definition of a bimbo?
A bimbo is somebody that's really dumb and I guess that's it. They're just dumb and kind of vapid. They could even be innocent in some ways. They're just not they're, they use their sexuality and they're not that smart. Those would be the two characteristics of bimbos that I would have. But I'm interested in hearing Sam's definition, Eric's definition, and Barry's of what they think what a bimbo is to them. And yours. Sam, you want to go first?
Well, I'll answer your question in my own experience. The bimbo term has been used around me to imply, yes, you're right, using femininity usually, but to either get ahead or to be socially acceptable. And unfortunately, usually it's to glom onto some guy with money.
Yeah.
That's how it's been, used in my presence. That's what I've seen. I've never looked up the dictionary word itself, but those are the implications when
Yeah.
it's been used, and I've heard it.
Yeah. Agreed. Eric?
I don't like any kind of label like that because you don't know the real person and labels can stick.
Right.
So
But
I
if
would
you
not
hear,
use it.
not that you would use it, Eric, but when you hear it, what do you think the person means when they're saying it?
I mean, the sexuality aspect comes to mind. That's how I learned the word.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. And I just try not to think too much of it.
So,
Yeah.
Kayla, did you mean to imply the sexuality part when you called them bimbos?
Um, I guess in a very small sense, depending on what you think, what you would define as sexuality. But um, for instance, the women that are decent looking or in other people's eyes, good looking. There's a stereotype. And yeah, I don't like stereotypes too. But I do see a stereotype of the women in the administration. But when I think of a bimbo, I think of somebody, um, relatively decent, good looking, who's not very smart, and who is kind of a sellout. It's kind of harsh. Sorry. I
No, no,
apologize if I'm offending anybody.
no, no, no. You're not offending anybody. I just want to be careful to not apply different standards regarding sexuality to women as we do to men. That's the only
Mm.
reason I'm flagging that. Barry,
I
what
think,
was your definition?
I think Kayla already said it. A 20-ish female who gets by on looks and little else.
Okay. Sam?
Here's a pointed question. Was Marilyn Monroe a bimbo?
No, she was pretty smart.
That's the point I'm getting at. But she used her looks and her attractiveness to get ahead.
Yeah.
But doesn't
She,
everybody use their best assets to get ahead, whatever those assets are?
Most of the time.
well, bimbo implies appearance, using the appearance and
So
sexuality.
again,
But would you say that the Me Too movement is changing that attitude?
Not enough.
Yeah.
that's why I'm bringing it up because we have to be conscious when we do that.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
If we're going to use the double standard, if we agree that everybody uses their best assets in order to get ahead, and then we only single out women when they use their looks to get ahead. When men, George Clooney, nobody would call him a bimbo. His look certainly helped him early on,
He also had family. Yeah.
but that's not the point I'm trying to make. A lot of these people have,
On the other hand, technically adept young males are called nerds or geeks or Poindexters. It's the same kind of a deal. It's the one thing that they can earn a living on and not much else. Social, asocial or socially inept.
As an
let me let,
example, Would you say like Trump is a male bimbo?
No.
He
No.
doesn't use his
No.
looks
Kind
to
of
get
Greg, he's
ahead.
No,
not attractive.
it's not about looks, but there's some other
But
thing that he used to get ahead. His business savvy, his whatever he did
He
to
has no
step on
business
people.
savvy. It's his
wait,
connections. It's his criminal
wait.
past.
I'm
Just
just
back
trying
up
to
for one
understand
second.
it. Yeah.
Because the more important point that I'm trying to bring out is when Kamala Harris ran, the way she was targeted was that she slept her way to the top. And that was not true. They wanted and tried to portray her as a bimbo. And that was not true, is not true. It's unfair. And I'm going to throw a flag down if that happens. Now, there are some people definitely in the MAGA movement that are bimbos. They really are.
Yeah, that's
But
basically what I'm saying.
Yes.
but I don't know that it's ones that are in the administration. I think they're on
Christy
college
Noem is a
campuses. No,
bimbo.
but this
Yeah.
is but
But do you have an example of a male bimbo?
no,
Channing
because
Tatum.
we wouldn't
No, I'm kidding.
we would never label someone that way. We would
We
never
wouldn't label it,
label
but
a man that way.
I'm just
That's the
trying to
I
point.
just
understand.
named Channing Tatum.
Yeah. Kayla just did it.
Who is it?
Channing Tatum. He's a badass dancer though, and he's hot, but he's kind of a male bimbo in my eyes.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, and I know
You
nothing.
should look him up. He's wonderful.
And why would you think that see, again, the idea of a bimbo to me connotates that they will get something they don't deserve.
Ah, I see. I got you, Stacy. I don't have the same feeling, and um I appreciate that though.
Right, right.
Just
Thank
trying to understand, like if it was a major sports figure who did something wrong and then got away with it.
I got an example of a male bimbo, a Chippendale dancer.
Mhm.
Are they really getting ahead?
Depends on the tips.
Oh,
I don't
sorry.
know.
Wait a minute. Sorry. Did I say that?
Yes,
Sorry.
you did. It's on record, Sam.
A good one, Eric.
Sorry.
Yes, that's right.
I did not actually mean that. Okay.
Eric meant it though. Or maybe not. I don't know. I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah, is this okay? I feel bad because this is a good laugh, yeah? Like sometimes you just gotta laugh at those idiots. I swear. There are some days where I'm like, yeah, I need a good laugh. It's a sad laugh, but it's a laugh. And it inspires hope. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, you know, it's serious, right? Some days you just have to ease up on the seriousness of it all and
Yeah.
have a good laugh. So
Yeah.
that's why I use the word bimbo, and I'm sorry. Yes, I could
Don't be
understand
so,
different,
you have nothing to
you
be
know.
sorry for. I don't see one thing. Please don't. If I like point something out, I'm not placing blame. You have nothing to be sorry about. I just want to bring it into awareness. There's, and Kayla, you and me especially, other women have to stop saying they're sorry. And I wish Gail were here.
And notice how spending this time on this word was meaningful because each of us understands each other better, as opposed to just saying, oh, well, bimbo has this meaning, and that's why I
Exactly.
now, interpret that person's intention of using that word thusly. Okay. That's the problem right there. Okay. And
Exactly.
that refers to multiple conversations that we've had about, stopping to understand definitions and clarifications.
But this relates to what I said to you yesterday about the piece that I think is important, this conversation.
So, Stacy, could you talk a little bit about what you're trying to do? Like, I got a sense of it from some posts you did, but like, just give us a flavor of what kind of workshop you're trying to put together.
I think I will just send, I'm not ready to do it. Well, unless I just read the, So prompted by everything that happened here, how that prompted my own personal growth and me deciding that I needed a plan of action for myself. I on the so I'm doing it's a course, it's a workshop, and it gets developed as I go, as we go, depending on who shows up. And it's I call it using so it's a strategic kind of. Yeah, I'm going to save it for another time, but you know what?
Okay.
When I get off, I'll send you a Google Doc that you could look at, and then if you have questions that come up from there. But it focuses, actually, talk about something else, and I'll find something that I can read to you, and you'll get it.
Can I
Okay.
bring up another example? In the administration,
Go for it.
I don't have proof, but I did read, and I think Gail did tell me that before Alina Habba got her very estimable position as chief lawyer for the felon in chief, that she had a lot of surgery done. This is what I've been told, okay? Because she knew that he liked a certain look, and that if she looked that way, he would be more likely to hire her. So I have heard this. I can't prove it because I don't have the article in front of me, but I've heard it from multiple sources that this is true. Anybody know the details here? And that's not the only example, right? Because clearly you look at all those press secretaries, and I know exactly what Kayla's, meaning when she says bimbo. Okay. I would say that too.
Yeah, I put in the chat that she's a bimbo.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to share is that Fox News, when I was married, one of the family members had a high position in Fox, and all the women, back then at least, all had dark hair. So this is something, but again, I don't like to blame the victim. I try to focus the blame on the person in power. That other person is merely changing herself in a way that we might not think shows a lot of integrity, because I don't think it shows integrity, but she's responding to a higher power above her. I would rather target that higher power that incentivizes people to sell their soul.
Well, the higher power actually was indicted, right, for sexual assault, or right?
Yes,
The chief of Fox isn't that the guy Ailes or whatever his name was?
Roger Ailes, yeah.
Yeah. So that happened, So evidently it wasn't enough. It's still happening.
But what I'm
Hostage fined what,
saying,
700 or $800 billion, whatever. Sorry, $1 million for not sticking to the truth, and yet they're still allowed to broadcast. What a fuck up.
I know, I agree. All I'm trying to say is while we could definitely look at the women there that changed themselves and judge them, and I'm not saying that's not fine to do, it is. I would rather go one step higher and spend our time judging the step above than to follow this pattern of blaming the victim. I'm not saying they're victims, but I'm saying we tend to look at what people with lesser power do wrong instead of shooting to the top and recognizing that the people in power cause a trickle down of dysfunction.
I'd rather look everywhere because it's a supply and demand issue.
So you can look everywhere, and I get that. And me, I want to be focused because I know, like, that's what I mean about different containers.
Look, you could say that I could take things to an extreme, but I'll say this right now, and sorry if it offends anybody. I find fake breasts really ugly. Okay. And yet, you go to the Standard Beach or you go pick up any, magazine, any style magazine or any other magazine, and I have to say, like 80, 90% of the breasts there are just augmented. It's really ugly to me. So these are people making individual judgments. They're choosing to go to the beach on their own. They know that this is supply and demand at work, And unfortunately, that's attractive to a lot of, I'll say, yeah, men. A lot of men find that attractive, which not me, but
Well,
so
that's good
those are
to
people
hear.
who are not working for anyone. They're just in out there in the dating economy.
I'm laughing
Sad, isn't
because
it?
I have as much dislike for that because I'm like, the one place I had an advantage, people can now augment themselves.
Okay. If that's
So
true,
this
I'll get
is all
boobs.
it's a reflection on society. So
Yes. That's what I
what
mean. It's a
happened?
systemic issue. It's everywhere.
Yeah, so what are we teaching kids that make them think that's the way to go? And
Well,
then that's what are you teaching the girls that would make them want to get that?
look, it's a subtle point, but if kids don't see natural boobs anywhere, then they only imagine and they think these perfect spheres are the way boobs ought to look. You're not
Or they get it
educating
from
kids
porn.
by
Well, you're
saying,
getting the media, yeah,
yeah,
the media and
and
porn
that's
and
what
all
all this
that crap.
suppression, all this, hypocrisy of, don't go to the beach unless you're like fully clothed, or don't show this or don't show that. It's this Puritan, this tight ass puritanical stupid set of values that is getting in the way of people really understanding human biology, human physiology, human anatomy, and treating it as normal as opposed to sexualizing and objectifying it. Look, at
Okay.
some point I'm guilty of the same, but come on, society is, especially US society,
Yeah.
has done a really, really bad job of accepting human bodies.
I think Kayla wanted to say something and we all jumped over her.
Sorry.
Oh, I did? I have lots of thoughts about that, but I'm actually wiping down my kitchen counter. So if you heard anything, it's
Okay.
probably that. But if you want to hear my opinion,
You've got the
it's
next
sad,
34
isn't
minutes.
it? It's really sad, isn't it? It is a really terrible culture, and I have to kind of break it down in this way because in other cultures, for instance, in Tahiti, when you go on the beach from when you were born till when you die and you're a woman, you can expose your breasts. It's normal. You go to the beach and it's all topless. You go to the pool, it's topless. And as a foreigner to that country, my first time, it was a shock, but then immediately a relief because I knew that it was a much more freer society on women and their bodies than the United States. So it made me really happy that it's taught or not taught at a young age to sexualize that part of a woman's body. And so for the breast augmentations and such, I feel so bad that that is in our society right now and that it's taught from a young age here because it is nothing but a money play and it just grates on a woman's self-esteem, which is still pretty fragile. I have to say that every woman that I've spoken to and encountered had low self-esteem like all their lives. At some point in their lives, there were higher self-esteems, but based on looks, you know. So do I like it? No, absolutely. I think a woman's breasts are, you know, their own and unique, just like every part of their body. It's beautiful in every stage of its life. But I also feel for those who want to have better self-esteem and confidence. And if they have the money, then why not? Um, would I get liposuction if somebody, gave me a lot of money? Yeah, probably, but it's so hard. It like weighs heavy on my heart because I don't think that we should be subjected to high heels or tight clothes or, anything that enhances our sexuality in a cultural place where sexuality is like this crazy taboo. Because in Tahiti, it's not. Actually, they embrace their sexuality in such a way that it's very respectful. And as a woman, it's just amazing. But anyways, that's my thought. Over.
Thank you. Yeah, and I want to suggest that the reason we are the way we are here is because that's the way certain men in power, certain capitalist men in power want it to be. Like you said, it's a big business. And when we have men that traffic young girls or go into the dressing rooms of young beauty contestants, it's all about them and their needs and how they want women to look. And them having this abundance of power leads to that. The other thing I wanted to share is that, so when I was younger, I mean, I still am, I always had a big nose. And at that time, it wasn't breast augmentation that was popular, but it was nose jobs. And I remember like looking in the mirror, staring at the mirror, absolutely hating my nose, thinking about like, like looking at it, how it could be just a little bit different with a little bit of an adjustment. And after staring for a really long time, I was like, but I wouldn't be me. And there was no way I was going to do that because I wouldn't be me. Um, but Kayla, to your last point, I used to be like really resistant to this idea of, cosmetic surgery and all that, and pretty kind of judgmental about it. I'm way less judgmental on that as I've ever been. Um, and every once in a while, I think, oh, if I could just push this up a little bit.
Right?
But
No,
that
I'm
being,
the same.
but now you didn't see where I was pointing to. I was actually pointing to around my chin area. But what I would say is I wholeheartedly believe if we didn't have the for-profit medical model, there'd be things you can use on your face that you wouldn't need surgery. But that's not profitable enough in our country.
I'd also like to mention what teenagers are going through with social media. They have filters on the phones to make them look different and to post, make their what they perceive as blemishes to, yeah, just correct whatever they think the would look good, and so they get more likes on the post. And it's a crazy way for especially a girl to grow up.
And I just want to say, because it just became obvious to me, only recently did I start not being on camera and just having my picture up. And I'm sure Kayla will agree or she wouldn't be doing it. It's so much more relaxing for me. Now, it really is. Now, on certain calls, well, I try to always show up because there is something to be said for being present. But I'm totally present in this call, even though it's only my picture there. That's not the same for everybody. But because we were discussing what should be through the lens of men, and we were suggesting that it's better to show up on camera again through the lens of men. And Sam, I don't just mean here because I see your eyes perking up. That mostly came from people like Doug, Breitbart, people like that. And there's something to be said for it because of the body language and all these things. That being said, I was pushing my own needs aside because what's best for me is to be off camera. But I was pushing that aside to do what I thought you guys wanted and needed. And it wasn't such a conscious process. I'm just retracing it just to, bring it into awareness. So I wanted to mention that as well. And by the way, it would really be cool if we had a filter that I could put on over my thing that moves with my face, like animation. That would be awesome, so that it's still me, it's still the person. And by the way, this isn't just women. When I look at Facebook and I see some of you guys' pictures, people put up pictures that are 30 years old. Like, who are these people? Who the hell are, I meet them in person. I'm like, what? I love that,
I
Barry.
love my
I love
30-year-old pictures.
it.
For
I'm like,
Mother's Day.
that's
Oh, I'm
much
sorry.
more expressive. I really like what Barry's doing with the accessories because it's just playful and expressive and it's wonderful. You can't get mad at that, but you can get a sense of the person from what they choose to pick.
We used the filters for Purim back when the pandemic was on.
Oh, that's fun.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember how we got here.
Bimbos. We were talking about bimbos.
Oh, specifically administration bimbos. There's so many of them.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Fox bimbos. Oh, geez, Fox
You
bimbos.
know, because we're talking about this, and it's not really a favorable conversation in a lot of spaces, right? There are certain spaces that talk about like, um, looks and body in a more superficial way. But I love how we're kind of talking about it in a psychological way. I just want to say that. And also, what I also want to say is when I was much younger, um, I was bullied for the way I looked, but because the girls were very jealous of me. And as I was growing older and more into it in high school, nobody approached me. Like none of the guys wanted to date me because they thought that I was too intimidating because of the way I looked and because I was quiet. Um, and then when I was in college or when I went to, further schooling after that, people didn't take me seriously. And I realized that that's how, here in the United States, women are viewed. So, anyways, and now I'm getting like really nostalgic. So I'll stop right there.
I have attended certain Zoom calls or Teams calls where people say, be on camera. Now, to me, unless I'm actively doing something which is going to be distracting to other people, like blowing my nose or, farting or something like that, I'm usually on camera and on the mic. But I do know that some people are less comfortable being on camera and on the mic. So I don't believe it's been a practice of mine to say, hey, you should be on camera. If I've ever said that, then sorry for those moments. But I don't think usually I say that.
No, I don't think you have.
More often than not, you're off camera.
That's because I'm making coffee or dealing with the dogs or farting or, blowing my nose or something like that. Yeah.
Often more than half the time.
Now I'm
Well,
curious, um, if this was a work situation, would it make sense? Because I've heard it said that people in a working remotely should see each other all day. And I never was in that situation, but I'm just curious what your opinion is there.
my opinion,
Yeah.
I think it's a micromanagement tactic to say, I don't trust that you're actually working. And that's a
Ah,
different problem.
okay, I get it now. Yeah.
And I
So
think
for me,
managers, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, if I were running a group, I would need everybody to be on, well, I would need the men to be on camera because I need to see their responses and their reactions. Whereas when Kayla's talking, I already, there's enough common context between myself and other females that I can get what I need from their voice. Now, when I know people well, and I shouldn't say that because actually, with all of you, I could probably do it because I know you well enough that I wouldn't need to see you. But with a male that I don't know as well, I need to see them. I need to see their responses as I'm speaking in order to be able to judge where we're still in alignment and when, you know, we fork off, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So in my last gig, we did have teams all around the world. And we realized pretty early on that you had to meet face to face at least once for an entire day or 2 or 3 days. And then you could actually get to know each other well enough that remote, you could actually understand the person and how they react and how they would say things and how the body posture reflected certain thoughts, whatever. But without that, it took much, much, much longer to get that degree of familiarization with someone. It's not physically always possible to get people face to face when you've got a global company that's reasonably sized. And it costs money to put people in those spaces. But when possible, that really makes it much better for subsequent remote collaboration, in our opinion, in my opinion.
I put a Google Doc in the chat, but that's not even the one I want to use. But Eric, you could have that to look at later. Eric asked me before, so let me just say this one part. We have the mycelium metaphor. We have, food for thought and soil and all that. So I'm moving to the next element, which is air. And so the metaphor that I'm trying to paint that takes the feminine perspective is, I had a document somewhere which would make it easy. The idea is, so like for example, I have one section which I call three little burps because a burp is when air comes up from your stomach, which is where our emotions sit in the solar plexus, and it comes out in a burst of air. That's what a burp is. So I'm trying to use the metaphor of we have an amount of oxygen as a resource, and certain people suck it up. So we want to find the blowhards. There's a lot of play on words kind of thing. But the overall idea would be that so it starts with recognizing that words are vehicles that house energy. And then using too many words, you're polluting the environment. There's a whole bunch of words. So you want to use that resource. You don't want to drive too many planes and use so much gas. So, you want to be careful about the output. On the other hand, when we read, it's like we're cleaning up the environment because we're pulling in the words. So, what I'm trying to do is create a framework to teach little kids that will sound like a story. So, data is the new oil. It's that type of a thing. Thinking about paying with attention as opposed to paying with money, shifting the way we think of currency. That's the kind of, I'm just throwing out a whole bunch of things, but it's those things crossing with a slight feminine shift, just slightly. So if we come up with 10 principles, We just want to change one of those things to shift it. Does that answer you a little bit, Eric? I know it's vague, but
I'm getting a little picture there. Um,
I
yeah,
will share more and I'll
yeah.
unfold it in a way that makes sense to where people are on that spiral. Because one thing I'm going to say, and this is something that I think will be helped, I think we haven't gotten it right when it comes to time and space. And that's the piece that I think is captured in that feminine energy that both male and females have. But that's been the part that, because of the power dynamics, it's gotten left out of the conversation. So I want to focus it back there, starting with the now. And then you could move out in both directions, before and after. But it's about focusing on the now, recognizing things that we're not in control of time. So part of that is letting go. So it ties in emotional work with drama therapy, with music. Like in my thing, music does the heavy lifting. So if the goal is to release and transform emotions, music will aid. So music is that augmentation.
Yeah, I played music yesterday for people in my community, and yeah, it helps set the mood. Yep. Um, One thing I was thinking with your metaphor of air, one thing I remember, like working in New York, walking down the street and people smoking in front of me, the smoke would come my way, and I would feel like you're stealing my air.
Yes.
So that's a good metaphor to. Um, so who is stealing our air these days?
Well, to continue that metaphor, because again, I'm talking about the individual, we have to figure out how to put boundaries around us, how to have a protective membrane around us, because this method is supposed to solve for choice, meaning that something that I want and need should not impinge with what you want and need,
Mhm.
and yet we still need to be in the same reality.
Yep. Now, see, that smoker could be addicted and they could say they have a need for that cigarette.
And that's fine, but they
Yeah,
need to stay 12 feet away from me.
right. Or in their
And
own
if they
room.
want to come closer, they have to change because I have my boundaries up. And if they want to penetrate the membrane, whoever wants to penetrate your membrane, you have to receive it in. That's prioritizing personal freedom.
Right. But that guy's just walking down the street. He doesn't even know me. Yeah, what would I have said?
Oh,
It's still gonna, yeah,
yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I was just, going
yeah. I'm
back to
just using
why
it
I
as an
metaphor.
example to think about. Like in that situation, I have to walk on this street. There's nothing I could really do other than hold my nose
Right. Or
until
you
I get,
or you have to move, and that's not fair.
yeah. So, but that's okay. Um, See,
You're
there's a
smoking
line there between aggression and just oblivion. Um, if it was an aggressive thing, then maybe someone was blowing smoke in my face. That's a different scenario. Um,
But
so yeah.
think of it in terms of a restaurant.
Hmm.
Now we have laws that say you cannot smoke in the restaurant.
Yep.
So there was an intervention into the system,
Yeah. Before that, I was getting secondhand smoke all over the place. Yep.
and children get it all the time. And again, what can they do? Because the power is not equal between the
Yeah.
parent smoking in their face and them being stuck in the car with the smoke.
Yeah. Just think about how you could relate that to larger issues in society. Just use that example, suggesting it.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why I picked it.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
I am particularly triggered by both smoking and drinking. Drinking, and I'm really trying not to be so disparaging of drinkers, but drinking is not healthy at any level. And there's this social acceptance of drinking as it's totally fine that I think is still unhealthy for society. And yet it's so taboo to talk about because so many people drink. And I think that is difficult to bring up with a lot of people.
Do you remember when the drinking age was 18 instead of 21?
I do.
Yeah, because there was an essay in my high school, and I wrote one about why we should raise the drinking age to 21. So somebody sponsored that contest, and I entered it, and I used like logical reasoning that about how alcohol affects the brain. So that's where I was coming from. But the issue was important that they needed high school kids to say, yes, I'm willing to wait.
That's an excellent, do you think you could find that essay?
No, I can't find anything anymore.
What I want to say to Sam though is this goes to free choice. If somebody's not drunk and somebody's not driving, it shouldn't bother you if they drink or not.
No, it doesn't bother me on a personal level. It's just sad that that person is killing brain cells to me.
Yeah, that's when I would say what I say to everybody that talks about homosexuals or whatever. Doesn't affect you. It shouldn't, look somewhere else.
But it does because it's so prevalent that hundreds of millions of people's brain cells are getting killed. And you can say, hey, education is part of the problem. Yeah, well, drinking is also part of the problem.
So are you suggesting that we have prohibition?
Yes, I really am. I'm okay. If we care about the future at all, then we need a healthy society and we need to understand the elements of health.
And you don't see how that is no different than people that want to outlaw porn or like to me that's exactly the same kind of rigid thinking that I think we're trying to identify and steer away from.
Well, I think the long-term effects of alcohol are persistent. Now, I could be wrong on this, whereas I don't see, other than emotionally and psychologically, the long-term effects of watching porn. It's not physical, right?
Oh, are you kidding? There's terrible effects to watching porn. But my battery's dying. I gotta plug it. And I didn't mean to argue the point. I'm just saying that
Yeah, from a
I'm
systemic
just
standpoint, I agree with you, yeah. Yeah, if what you're talking about is there has to be a porn industry and porn actors have to get paid and they have to get all these diseases eradicated. Yeah, so systemically, I do agree with you.
no, but my real point is as adults, we all deserve the opportunity to make our own choices. So while I think it's important to educate
Yeah,
so that people can make good choices for
right.
themselves,
Yeah.
I really push back against anything that requires forcing.
Right. So, I was stopping there. Just like, if you want to recommend that people read, and it's sad that people don't read, so we have a stupid population that doesn't read. I'm not forcing people. I'm not saying I want to force people to read, just like I don't want to force people to not drink. But I want, like you said, to get this awareness out there so that people understand what's happening to them, their families, their societies, you know, as we tolerate bad practices that affect our health. That is a more effective way. I agree.
So I'm sorry to make this a ping pong. I just want to say one more thing because I know you don't think I'm stupid. And yet sometimes I'll say it for shock value, but I'm very open about the fact I don't read. I don't want to read. It is work for me. I read when I have to. only when I have to, as I decide. So if I need to know something because I'm internally motivated through my curiosity for whatever reasons, then I'll read. But I hate it. And I don't want to do anything that I don't like to do. Therefore, I don't read. So wouldn't it be kind of unfair? I mean, I'm not a stupid person. So to, make the assumption that people that don't read are stupid. That being said, let me put for the record, when I look for a male partner, I want a man who reads. But I don't want to read unless it's a script or a Facebook post.
Well, just since it's a point you wanted to raise, I think reading is encompassing new information, new perspectives. And that, interestingly, used to be just in the form of written words on paper. But now it comes through interacting with Perplexity. It comes from, conversations with bots, even verbal and audible. So reading now has this larger context, where you have multiple different channels through which you can get stories, books, articles, perspectives, etc. So reading was just one way of referring to it, but what I meant was the ingestion of new ideas and new stories and new perspectives.
Totally agree.
So I'm thinking young people need a phase where they're trying things and exploring for learning who they are, and that may involve some self-destructive behaviors, but then they have to eventually get out of that phase. So can, what encourages them to say, okay, no more drinking? Or what would do that without just them totally wrecking their lives?
I
It's got to be something earlier in their upbringing.
I personally believe that if children are taught from the very, very beginning to question their own feelings, their own emotions, to be able to discuss this and talk about it, which is where I'm going in what I'm trying to do, that by the time they get to those teenage years, it's not the rebellion phase that's needed any longer. I mean, rebellion comes from suppression.
Yeah, so you have to educate the parents on these issues so they bring up their kids so the kids will choose to um, the right path, the paths that are not self-destructive.
So I really prefer an intergenerational approach. And what I mean by that is like Sesame Street, for example, how it had hidden messages for adults while
Yep.
teaching the kids. So I really push for that because if we do it that way, then the whole village can be there together.
Yep. Now these days, yeah, parents and kids, they're getting a lot of messages from the new media sources, and I'm not sure the quality.
And it's all based on monetization, not social.
Ah, yes.
It's not
That's
social values that drives whether or not I'm exposed to something. It's whether or not that click means $10 for somebody.
And that's exactly why in this shift thing I'm trying to do, I focus on capitalism and money and values and switching that to a paradigm of attention.
A lot of parents, they just want the kids, they want to get away from the responsibility of watching their kids. They'll just sit them in front of whatever.
I want to share a personal reaction that decades ago, when I first came across Sesame Street, it was jarring. I didn't realize until much, much later that the nature of that jarringness was because is really the only show on TV that was, and I use today's terminology, diverse. All the other shows on TV at the time were all, I hate to say it, but white people in the US. Yeah, the occasional black servant, is unfortunate. Yeah, Cato, was the occasional, caricature of an Asian man. But Sesame Street was the first to present real people in diverse neighborhoods. Of course, they also had, furries. So it was really diverse. But, it took me a long time to realize why I felt so different to watch Sesame Street versus all these other shows. Anyway, that was just a personal reaction that I got that I didn't understand until much later.
I'm glad you said that, Sam. I experienced that same reaction from Sesame Street. It was like almost this uncomfortableness. And I was really young.
And oh, by the way, Sesame Street in those days didn't have an Asian. It had a black person, right? It had, all kinds of different furries, but no
Hispanic.
Asian still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you pointed that out. I just remember it feeling really uncomfortable. It's like, why is this so different?
Yeah.
And not understanding why it was.
Yes.
Barry, do you have something you want to add? You've been quiet a lot and we're at the top of the hour.
I did, but the time went by and now I've just let it go by.
Can
Why
you
do you
cite
do
it so we
that?
can remember it for next time?
Hmm?
Can you
No,
name
because I can't even remember what it was. 5 or 10 minutes ago, I was going to say something and I didn't get a word in edgewise, so I just let it go by.
Why didn't you put your hand up?
The hand is up.
He put his filters on.
No, I'm
Oh, I
saying
know what. I remember what it was now. I was going to bring up the distinction between data and information. I define data as the answer to a question no one ever asked or cares about, and information as the answer to a question someone asked or at least has on their mind. And we're awash in data, and it's drowning out the information, which is the answer to a question that somebody wants to get the answer to, and not the answer to a question no one cares about or ever asked.
Now it's interesting. Is AI giving us data or information?
Depends on whether you ask it a question.
Yeah.
Right.
I only talk to AI when I have to ask a question, and hopefully it's going to give me information that answers my question, which mostly it does.
And by the way, I can't remember the last time I did a Google search. I'm interacting entirely with Perplexities these days, not
And I
Google.
use Gemini, same deal.
Yeah.
Okay, Barry, can you slow that down? Because I like that. Information is what people like, stuff people want to know or ask for.
Data is the answer to a question no one asked or cares about. Information is the answer to a question that somebody asked or at least has on their mind.
Got it.
And we're washing data to the detriment of getting useful information that answers the questions that people care about or even have actually asked.
Barry, one of the phrases I use is drowning in data and starving for attention.
Yeah. And the need for attention is one of the reasons that people supply lots and lots of data that no one particularly cares about. They want an audience, but the audience isn't getting any information that answers their own, questions, articulated or otherwise.
And that ties back to the very beginning of the call, which is when I said one of the needs for separating the audiences.
Right. An audience, a presenter wants to present information the audience is attending because they're interested in it. They want to hear the material because the material is informing them. And if you have to listen to somebody who's a blowhard and they're just talking and you're not getting anything out of it, your eyes glaze over. Your mind wanders, Sam.
I think it's interesting that you bring this up because I think there's another whole conversation, which we've had multiple times before, but I think it's worth revisiting about data, information, knowledge, insight, wisdom, spirituality, all of those things. So that's always rich for me. So if we talk about that again, I'm not going to ever say, "Oh man, we're talking about the same old thing again." Okay?
It's one of my slides.
Always rich.
Actually, it's actually a slide in my talk. Literally,
Harry,
what you
don't go
recite.
back and saying you've already got it. Okay. The whole point to the value is revisiting it with the people in the room. For me.
No,
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm questioning, are we really at the knowledge level with AI now, or I don't see it yet. Our knowledge bases, I think it's still artificial. I don't think we've really grasped. What do you
Okay.
think?
At the risk of extending this, I think my answer to you is yes. You know why? Because all people do is simple pattern regurgitation, usually. Okay.
Yeah.
Very few people actually have an original thought. If
Mm.
you look at what most people say, it's
Yep.
something they heard or read or pieced together in trivial ways from something else they've seen or heard or read, which is why
Yep.
really deep Bohemian conversation is rare.
Hmm.
It's easy to just regurgitate something that's been said or heard or written. It's more interesting to see how that comes together with another idea in a unique and original way. Over.
Yep. Thank you.
Stacy?
Yeah. Barry, can you send that to me on like Messenger or something, please, while you have it handy? Because I don't know how to save these things and I want
about to
that
say the
chart.
chat. All right, I can go back to Messenger.
No, this chat will not save the graphic, but if you right click on it, you can actually save it.
Just
But
go to
Sam, what I wanted to say is to your point about originality. That is because in this current patriarchal society that uses force and authority the way it does, original thoughts get drowned out, especially if they're not leading to profit.
Yeah, witness the destruction of the Department of Education. That's indicative of some of that. They just want workers that understand manuals. That's about the level of education they want.
And Eric, to go back to your original question, because Sam just triggered it in me, part of the Aikido strategy kind of thing is not focusing on what's wrong. We pretty much have a handle. But in my opinion, so it's like there are people, they want to build for the future, but they don't want to plan for it.
Okay.
So what I want to do is plan 2 steps ahead. We see the direction it's going rather than stay with that and keep looking at it and say what's wrong with it and all these other things. I want to say, all right, I see this coming from this direction. Let me run up ahead and prepare for it.
Yep.
And I also have to leave, but this was
Hey,
very,
Stacy, let me
yes.
tease you with a little bit for the next conversation, okay? You want
Okay.
to be 2 steps ahead? I want to be two steps behind. And I'll explain that later.
And that's perfect. And then we can come back to the middle and blend our information, which is the perfect way. But again, my point is 3 different tracks.
Yeah.
One way, the second way, and then the blended way. I'm doing the blended way.
That is civil listening. That's generous listening.
Right. And as a woman, I've been generously listening for over 6 decades. I am done being generous with my listening. That's something that men have to start practicing to do. And I will go into that in my workshops.
Okay.
Anyway, it
That
was a
that
pleasure.
carried some emotional weight. But
Absolutely.
let me also say, as an Asian in a white society, I do feel that very, very strongly also.
You know what? And I just want to say that's an important piece to this also, because one thing that, let's say, the negative people do, they are willing to make alliances with each other. So crooks will work with other crooks without a problem. When it comes to marginalized voices or less powerful voices, we don't tend to do that. But we don't, because like you just said, well, but it's like this, it's worse for black people, it's worse for Asians, it's worse for gay people, it's worse for this, it's worse. We all have our own. Well, what I'm saying is, if we focus on women, there are women in every other group in existence. So I'm saying that's where I want to start the shift, because I think that will be the best way to touch all the bases. Okay.
Stacey,
Bye.
given
Thank you.
that statement, given that
Yeah.
statement, one of
Yes.
your strongest collaborators, if I know anything, would be Gail. She feels really, really strongly about that point.
So here, I just want to share this because this is important. I want to make sure the sentiments don't get lost. Where I'm starting from in my workshop right now is the more aggressive energy in me, because I'm trying to develop something that I'll be using in the real world in my community, targeted towards Republican men. So the way I design this, I would want a different call with Gail for a different purpose. The first call that I'm doing, I actually call it A Few Good Men. And I'm trying to balance out the energy for that particular call. And Sam, it's one that I specifically invited you to, which is why I forwarded it to you. And that's not to leave anybody else out. It's because I understand the blueprint. I understand the different energies that I need for them to work off of each other with me in the mix. And that's not something I could explain to somebody, because nobody knows what I know. Like, this is my own unique piece of the pie, piece of the puzzle. Um, but anyway, the idea for me is to create it as I go. And I'm there's a certain call that I'd want to build with Gail and some other people that have reached out. But then there's another call for Gail that I would match her up with other people doing that. I want to focus the healing part of what I'm doing on men. I specifically want to work with men. And what I can tell you looking back is, after all these years, I can clearly recognize how being with all these men has helped me to grow, because the purpose of relationships are to grow. Both sides of the equation in a relationship need each other to grow. So for me, it has helped. This particular situation that I've been in over these past few years has helped me to grow. I can also help others to grow, but it's that I'm on this like male female dynamic thing. That's my thing. And I do look forward to the next call. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any last words or last thoughts?
Have a good week. Happy Memorial Day, if that's the right.
Oh, I am pissed off this Memorial Day, and I sent out a Facebook rant on this one. I don't want to hear a fucking MAGA celebrate Memorial Day this weekend. I really, really don't want to. They're desecrating the meaning of this day. They're disrespecting, people who fought and lost their lives and limbs fighting for the Constitution of this world, which MAGAs do not fucking understand. I am fucking pissed with any MAGA who will actually celebrate Memorial Day this weekend. Over. Sorry for using so many expletives, but I feel very strongly about this.
Well, have a somber Memorial Day.
Yeah,
You too,
remember
Danny.
the real meaning of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.